Just ahead on One Detroit, we're continuing our special series on the death of Vincent Chin, 40 years after he was killed as a result of anti-Asian sentiment. We'll examine the Asian American activism spurred by his death and explore the Asian American experience here in Michigan. Plus, we'll talk about a national Juneteenth collaboration between African American museums in Detroit and across the country. It's all coming up next on One Detroit.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support for this program is provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV, the Kresge Foundation.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Nissan Foundation and viewers like you.
Just ahead on this week's One Detroit. The Juneteenth holiday celebrates the day when the Emancipation Proclamation was enforced in Galveston, Texas, freeing the last remaining enslaved people and bringing an official end to slavery in the United States. Events are taking place throughout the nation to commemorate this historic day in 1865. Coming up, we'll hear how African American museums and historical institutions are coming together for a national program on Juneteenth. But first up, we're continuing our look at the life and legacy of Vincent Chin, a Chinese American who was beaten to death 40 years ago by two auto workers at a time when Japan bashing was rampant. Detroit, mired in recession, saw Japanese imports slam the Detroit auto industry. His killers never spent a day in jail. Chin's story is etched into Detroit's history, as well as in national history. His death launched a fight for Asian American justice here and across the country. Today, Chin's killing is being remembered as another wave of anti-Asian hate sweeps the country. One Detroit senior producer Bill Kubota has the story on the renewed movement for civil rights and equality, and how more and more Asian Americans are calling Michigan home.
In the 80s, the pervasive attitude beat the Japanese car companies. Asian Americans just collateral damage, you might say. It's different now. New Asians, more Michigan Asians yet to learn about Vincent Chin and what went on around here.
I decided, well, I think I'll buy a Toyota. This is in the 80s, right?
New car prices may never be lower, so now's the time to buy.
Because it was cheap and the same place that was selling Chevys and Chryslers and things were selling Toyotas. So I didn't think much about it. But.
See your Toyota dealer. He's got what it takes.
The car ran fine until it didn't. Arthur Park took it to a mechanic.
You find out what's wrong with my car? And he said, yes. I said, what? He said, it's shot. Oh, what do you mean? No, somebody shot it. Somebody shot the battery of your car. So there's some of that anti-Asian sentiment.
Arthur Park, Korean American, joined Detroiters taking action for Vincent Chin. The group leading the fight, the American Citizens for Justice. Asian American activism, not a new thing, goes back to the 1960s, the Vietnam era. But mostly then it was a West Coast thing, because that's where most Asian Americans lived. Protesters, mostly draft age, being asked to go kill other Asians.
It was young folks. What made the Vincent Chin case different is it brought together the first-generation immigrants, their American-born children. It brought together the Mandarin-speaking and the Cantonese-speaking, the suburban and the inner city. It brought together Chinese Americans and Japanese Americans who knew, there it is again, you all look alike.
Frank Wu, president of New York's Queens College, grew up in suburban Detroit.
The Vietnam War was a raw wound. And if you had this color of skin, texture of hair, shape of eye, you had the look of the enemy. You had the look of the enemy from World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, from all of these conflicts that people remembered well.
The killing of Vincent Chin less than a decade after the fall of Saigon. In Ann Arbor, the University of Michigan, they're talking activism then and now.
I think the start of Asian American Studies, or a class in the American Studies program. So those kind of gradually occurred later on in the 70s.
Parker Wu, campus activist. He joined the American Citizens for Justice, living history to students today.
So I was already a sophomore in college when I was starting to become more aware of Asian American history and activism. Learning about Vincent Chin was one of my earliest experiences, an exposure to any semblance of Asian American history. And I remember reading this poem about Vincent Chin and being wrecked by it, and going back to my mother asking, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me that this had happened, that it happened so close to us? That was a big turning point in my life when I realized there was Asian American history, not only broadly, but specific to Southeast Michigan, specific to Detroit. And so for this not to ever come up in the conversation, I was a little bit astounded. And I think that she was trying to protect me in a way. When I asked my parents if they had heard of Vincent Chin, that my dad finally disclosed the instances of racism he faced as a Korean American engineer in the auto industry. And the story he told me involved an exchange of words that was really akin to "because of you, MFs," the infamous words from the Vincent Chin story.
I think the younger generation needs to learn maybe certain things in the past. They need to learn the struggles that we went through as older activists and so forth, the kinds of difficulties that we had trying to maintain people's awareness, keeping information flows, and things like that.
Today, with 24 million Asian Americans, it's possible for, Fujianese not talking to Mandarin-speaking people, not speaking to Cantonese, just within the Chinese American community. Back then, it was very clear. If we didn't stand together, we wouldn't have a voice.
The situation there was very bad, don't get me wrong. I know that the unions would have these car bashing. We pay $1, you took a sledgehammer, you could hit a Toyota or whatever in a parking lot at a rally. But as bad as that was, I don't think the atmosphere then was nearly as bad as it is right now. It wasn't as pervasive as we have at this point. You've got a lot more attacks. You've got political figures and other people that are just legitimizing that kind of behavior.
Kung flu, yeah. Kung flu.
It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. I think we're going through a very, very trying cycle, social behavior, and the political dialogue between the trade war with China, COVID, and the fact you have this white nationalist movement running rampant.
The Vincent Chin case was a precursor to everything that we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. When the violence first started to happen, Asian Americans would remark, this isn't new. It's only the awareness of it that's new.
Then it happened March last year. The Atlanta spa shootings, 6 Asian women gunned down, leading to perhaps the biggest Asian American rally here since the Vincent Chin days.
And it was just an overwhelming number. I did not think that many people were going to be there.
To be here gathered today in unity, but unfortunately for such a devastating purpose.
Sina Vang and her friend Zora Bowens led the rally, the first of a few around the city, rooted in the George Floyd protests the year before.
It was really nice to be able to bring so many people together that really cared about a cause, about stopping hate and just unity in general. It was definitely a big first time for a lot of the older generation there, and it was nice to have them come out, especially when the older Asians have been such a big target in all of the hate crimes. I remember a lot of them coming up to us and just thanking us.
How to keep this going, keep people together? Around here, different communities are dispersed across the region. Detroit had a Chinatown once. Its last vestige is seen in the film Who Killed Vincent Chin? By then, most of the Chinese had moved to the suburbs. Now, more Asians. A mosque in Warren, South Macomb County, just north of Detroit, Bangladeshis, the highest concentration of them in the U.S. outside of New York. They're also on the east side, a Detroit neighborhood called Banglatown, and in Hamtramck, the once Polish enclave surrounded by the big city. This vaccination clinic's part of a program coordinated by Eastern Michigan University.
See him trimming. Can you see him trimming?
Dr. Tzu-Yin Wu is connecting Asian Americans in a different way by promoting better health care.
As a Taiwanese American, I know that sometimes it's not the best to be the smaller group because you get overlooked and people don't know you even exist.
Are you Dr. Wu?
I feel like it's my mission. I guess, early days, I had some sort of breast issue, and I was in my very early age of my life, and I feel like I was all along, and I was in a doctoral program of nursing, and I should have all the solutions. If I have all those capabilities and I cannot do it myself, what about those people in the community who just came to the United States and did not have anyone to go to? I feel like, hey, as a researcher, I need to find a way. I need to find a way to support especially the most underserved communities in Asian Americans.
Dr. Wu's program operates across the state. In Battle Creek, Southwest Michigan, a gathering at the Burma Center.
If you look around today, all of us came from Burma. Most of us here, this room won't be almost empty if refugees didn't come here. And refugee to me is a great thing because that's freedom.
I have a lot of experience that when I introduced myself that I'm from Burma, and then it was like, Burma? Where's that country?
Burma, or call it Myanmar, by India and China, more than 3,000 Burmese settled in Battle Creek now.
It's all based on social connection. So we got Battle Creek has been very accepting to immigrants like us.
So back in 2007, we have a huge military coup.
Par Maui, refugee, the keeper of books, stories of Burma and Battle Creek. Last year, she became a U.S. citizen.
And then I have no choice to living there, so I have to leave.
We were discriminated based on our religion and also for ethnicity. We're a minority ethnic group in Burma.
The Burmese here, they're Chin people, mostly Christian with their own culture of many in that country.
They sent me to Houston, but it's a big city and I don't think that I can survive there, so I choose living in Battle Creek because it's a huge Burmese community here, so we can help each other.
Here in America, we just drive cars, so we never move anymore. And then we just eat, and all the things that we eat don't go anywhere. Health is a priority. And the reason we're here today is, diabetes.
When these people come to this country, they have no insurance, they won't go to see doctors, they don't even think about doing any cancer screening like you have to do the colorectal or, breast and mammography. And the awareness, if we know that there are some groups out here, Burmese, Bangladesh, Nepali, Bhutanese, smaller groups, and we could work each other, support each other, and I think that's very important.
Madison Heights, another mostly white working/middle-class inner-ring Detroit suburb, but here, the past couple of decades, a change to this city.
I think that Madison Heights, for quite a while, has been not just our Chinatown, it's been our unofficial Asian town of Metro Detroit. And then where we are here, which is John R., and it's just south of 14 Mile, this strip, this area, really is our unofficial Asian town of Madison Heights.
Usually when people want to come down for Asian food, they come to Madison Heights.
Kevin Chai works with his family at a Taiwanese bakery. Lots of specialty items. The most popular?
Probably the pork bun. It's like the Chinese barbecue sauce with the roast pork in it. It's probably our most popular. There was a while where there's a lot of Chinese immigrants. I think mostly from just like mainland China. Probably coming here for school work.
Since then, more Asians from different places.
I'd say a lot of Vietnamese, Filipino, and Chinese.
Just behind us across the street, that way, is 168 Asian Mart. It is the largest Asian Mart in the state. I mean, they have everything. Like attracts like. So we have Asian businesses who see that this is a really great place to be. They see how welcoming the city is, and they see the kind of business that they can get, that they're going to get the foot traffic. So they're just setting up around it.
Michigan's Asian experience. How can you know if there's no one to tell you?
I just want some of these people to know the truth of what happened to us in World War II, which was not right.
Mary Kamidoy, an American Citizens for Justice activist since the 80s, speaking to sixth graders at Detroit Prep on the city's Near East Side.
And my dad was one of 13 people that came to Kalamazoo, Michigan to just get out and do something worthwhile. Even today, because when I go to middle schools, I have 7th and 8th graders ask me, how can you speak English so well? I said, because I don't know anything else to speak. Oh. Well, how long have you been here? I said, all my life.
Kamidoy, in her early 90s, spent the war years incarcerated in an internment camp only because her parents came from Japan.
You know, even at an 11-year-old, I remember all of this thinking, my goodness, they treated us like we were cattle. But, you know, this is how we were treated at the time when they were going to evacuate us out of our homes.
The last of a generation. Here's history from someone who lived it.
You know, now that I'm older and all, and I've lived through it, and I've accepted a lot of it, but I haven't forgot a day of it.
Which brings us back to Vincent Chin, where Asian Americans and Michigan history intersect.
It turns out that my dad was actually at one of the first rallies in 1983, but I don't think I really had conversations with my parents about it until much later. Of course, learning about what happened to Vincent Chin, I think that sort of sparked a lot of my interest in wanting to work on civil rights issues, realizing that there was, you know, many issues going on that we need to continue to fight for.
State Senator Stephanie Chang has introduced a bill requiring Asian American history in Michigan schools, part of a package of laws covering other people's history too.
So we have actually been pushing for our bills, which are about teaching not just Asian American history, but Latino history, Indigenous history, Arab and Chaldean history, and Black history within all of our schools, because we know that so many of our marginalized communities we are not learning about that history.
Lawyer and longtime American Citizens for Justice leader Roland Wong teaches Asian American issues at the University of Michigan. While some are getting it in college, he believes more needs to be done at the K-12 level.
What students are getting are snippets of incidents, whether it is the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II, and that may warrant a couple of paragraphs, maybe a little bit about the Exclusion Act, but I doubt it. So really, there needs to be a more comprehensive understanding of the contributions and the trials and tribulations of the Asian American community woven into U.S. history.
The Exclusion Act? The U.S. barred the Chinese from our shores from 1882 to 1943, if you didn't know.
What I think led to the Vincent Chin attacks was really the same things that probably led to the Chinese Exclusion Act and Japanese American internment, that it's this other that is coming in and threatening our jobs and threatening our society.
At Canton High School west of Detroit, students are getting more of this history because Richard Moy is there to teach it.
I know in our district, in the high school level, it's taught throughout the social studies, right? And that's one of the benefits. I think I can share my resources with other teachers.
And we know that our students deserve to know the truth about what's happened in our country, both the painful parts, but also the contributions of communities of color.
The Asian American history law could be like others enacted in Illinois and New Jersey, but with Michigan's legislature controlled by Republicans, that's unlikely anytime soon.
Oh, well, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm just hoping that you learned something from what I had to say.
When students are learning history, they should be able to see some of their own images in that history, because otherwise it could be viewed as not relevant. You know, if I don't see myself in that history, then I'm not a player in the community and in history.
And you can see the Academy Award nominated documentary Who Killed Vincent Chin on Detroit Public Television on June 20th at 10 p.m. Plus, Detroit Public TV, the City of Detroit, and several other organizations are hosting a series of events commemorating the 40th anniversary of Vincent Chin's death. The remembrance and rededication runs through June 19th. It includes a film series and national conversation. Get the full list of events at onedetroitpbs.org/Vincent Chin. Turning now to the celebration for the nation's newest federal holiday, Juneteenth. Here in Detroit, the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History is hosting local activities, and it's participating in a national virtual presentation focusing on freedom. American Black Journal's Stephen Henderson got the details from the Wright Museum CEO, Neil Barclay.
We, for the last several years, have been trying to get this point out to our colleagues in the museum field, particularly African American museum field. And we started out with just a few of us wanting to do something together to celebrate this holiday, now holiday. And so we gathered together and we put together a kind of video presentation where each of our cities contributes something about how Juneteenth was particularly resonant in our communities, right? We're now up to 9 this year of other museums who are doing this. And I guess it is on Juneteenth at 1 o'clock, this will air on our website and also on DPTV's website. This sort of hour-long presentation. This is a montage of 5 or so minutes from each of the cities.
And so what does that mean for us here in Detroit?
For here in Detroit, we'll see, we'll show that video. People will have it, they will have access to it at 1 o'clock on the 19th, as well as at 3 o'clock here in the museum and online. But our celebration is actually starting the day before. So we are doing a Underground Railroad treasure hunt, actually in Greektown. That'll happen on the 18th from 10 to 4. Different sites of historical significance, particularly as it relates to freedom, a theme of this particular holiday, will be highlighted in this treasure hunt, where folks will be able to discover certain places in the city that are particularly important to African Americans. It's sponsored with in a conjunction with the Michigan Underground Railroad Exploratory Collective, which is one of our affiliates. We then, on the 19th, we have a member of our community partners that same day in the museum will be really focusing on things like the partners include the Detroit chapter, for example, the League of Women Voters, or the Craft Insurance Company, which insures a lot of our homes and other properties here. A museum store features unique and classical imagery, et cetera. And then we're going to do a concert called Spirit Soar, which basically translates all this to music.
I kind of feel like we still have a lot of education to do, of people, African-American people, and the rest of the population about what this commemorates and why it matters. I think there's still a lot of confusion about that.
Sure, it is the occasion, I guess, this story. It marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, right? 1865, to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved people were freed. However, this was months after the Emancipation Proclamation had happened. So these soldiers were just really finding out about this months later. And in our internet world or social media world, where you could find out about anything instantaneously, that idea of people having been free for some time, according to the law, but not actually knowing about it, something that may not seem as significant, important, or a big deal to us living today. But back then it was huge that they would find out about this, and really an occasion for celebration, right? That it had gotten to them and got to their communities, right?
And it's a reminder of, I think, not taking for granted the idea of freedom, even when it seems you've won, or it seems you've reached that point, there's always more work to do.
There absolutely is, and I think our present moment is really highlighting that, isn't it? You know, the things that are happening in our country now really demonstrate how much freedom is something that we must fight for, you know, to preserve every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, they are taken away, as we're seeing in the political process and climate that we find ourselves in.
You can watch the national presentation of We the People on June 19th at 1 p.m. on pbsbooks.org and Facebook Live. That will do it for this week's One Detroit. Thanks for watching. Make sure to come back for One Detroit Arts and Culture on Mondays at 7:30 p.m. Head to the One Detroit website for all the stories we're working on. Follow us on social media and sign up for our weekly newsletter.